Join lifelong Star Wars fans Lauren and Steph as they dive into the world of Star Wars fan fiction, discussing a new fic each month, breaking down the writing style, characters, canon relationship, and more. This is your source for Star Wars fan fiction recommendations. So come on and find out why it's one hell of a fanfic.
Hey y'all, I'm Lauren, and welcome back to One Hell of a Fanfic, where we talk about a new Star Wars fanfic every month. And I'm here tonight with Steph, as always. How's it going, Steph?
Oh, it's going fantastic. As usual, I'm going to bring up the weather, and it's like 65. It's wonderful.
I feel like there's a reason everybody talks about the weather all the time, right? It affects our lives, so I get it.
At least none of our states are on fire.
Oh God, don't even get me started on that. That is awful. It's so awful and horrible. So yeah, me and Steph are currently not on fire. So that's good. The weather here is fine. I don't know. I haven't even been outside today, so I really don't have much to add to that. Because I've been inside all day long. This is horrible. This is my hibernation season, so I don't even care. I don't even look. Once August is over, then I'll look. So and it's over just a couple days, so that's coming up soon. But anyway, so this month we're talking about Black Gloves Orange Soup by Solia, which is a Reylo fanfic. And I really liked what this one was doing. I feel like it was doing something a little bit different than some other Reylo fanfics that I read, which I appreciated. But what were your initial kind of impressions on it?
I thought it was very cute. I don't know if it was very... You're right, it was very different than some of the other ones. And it kind of veered away from the canon characters that we are used to, but in an adorable way.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it was just kind of like you're saying, it's kind of building on some of the stuff that we've read before, but it's adding a little bit of something different as well, which I always appreciate. But did you want to give us some little facts about this one to get us started?
Absolutely. So the author of this, you mentioned Solia, also goes by Shayla Wrights. This story in particular was made in 2018 and has about 1,500 words. It's going to take you, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours to read. I kind of skimmed back over it during dinner tonight. Our favorite part, spice level. We talked about last month. Oh my goodness.
Last month. Feels like only a week ago.
No. We talked about last month how this one's going to be mature, and I was excited about that. But I'm going to put this spice level at like a 1 out of 4.
I thought that it was going to be higher than it was, and I was like, why did I think that? I wonder if it was something in the author tags that made me think that, but I mean, I still enjoyed it, but yeah, I was with you. I thought it was going to be higher than it was, and I can't remember why I thought that, but
And as a reminder for our spice levels, we have 0 as in no spice, 1 which is mild, nothing more than kissing, 2 which is implied adult behavior, and everything up to it, 3 which is adult behavior has been done, and 4 is when things get more. That really, for that, it kind of goes into the some of the tropes that we talk about in this one, which were this one's the enemies to lovers, and it's got that slow burn, and it has that lots of tension but never fulfilled. Does that have a name?
I don't know.
Unrequited tension. Oh,
I mean, it definitely felt like it was gonna go somewhere eventually. So, I mean, I don't know if I would quite call it unrequited, but yeah, there's a lot of tension. I mean, tension is a driving factor in this one, so I guess you could just leave it at that, really.
So canon. I don't know what to put this. Divergent? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I think technically you could call it canon compliant because some people might disagree with me on this. So, just a little disclaimer. I think technically it could be canon compliant because it fits in between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and the existence of this story doesn't actually change any of the established events in canon. Like it just sits right in between stuff that we already know. And whether this story happened in canon or not, I don't think it would really change anything.
That
So
makes
I
sense.
think that's what could make it canon compliant. But I know that, like, the definitions of like canon compliant and canon divergent can sometimes be a little bit fuzzy because obviously this never happened in canon.
Right. That we know
So
of.
that we
But
know of.
that's what makes it could be canon compliant. Is that well, it could have, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could have, but it didn't most likely. So then
Most likely.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I'm with you. When I was trying to like decide which one I thought, I did kind of like I was getting myself confused because I think I was overthinking it, and so yeah, there's our explanation for canon.
I hope no one's confused.
Because we are.
So this story was made off of a prompt for a user named Katura. They had a Reylo Valentine's exchange and a general prompt that a bunch of people worked on. So that's fun. But also another thing that you'll notice at the beginning of the fanfic is that the author writes to music and gives you an entire soundtrack to listen to while reading the story. You're going to need more time than the soundtrack gives you, but she breaks down and tells you like what each scene, what song best described it for her. Another thing that is pretty cool is that there is a podcast called The Reading Raylos that actually covered this, and when they cover it, they read the fan fiction. So it's basically like a little audiobook. And I will add that into our description of the show so that if anyone wants to go out there and just listen to it, they can.
Oh, that's awesome. Shout out to reading Raylos. That's a big deal to read a whole fanfic. Like,
Yeah, they did it in like an hour and a half.
wow. Cuz I mean, when I try to read something out loud, I mess up a lot. So, that's impressive when people can do that.
And for any of you out there going, but you guys sound great, that's the magic of fixing it in post.
Right.
So the last super cool thing is that there's a fan fiction based on this fan fiction. And it's got the longest name in history. It's The Golden Pockets or How Waffles May Have Paved the Road to Balance.
That's
Yep.
awesome. I
And there's
love
actually
that.
waffles. I read a little bit about it. And it's kind of vaguely off of this, but it sounds adorable. It's by Luke died for our sins, all one word.
I
That's who
love
wrote
that.
that.
That's a great pen name.
So why don't you tell us what is this about?
Okay, so the author's summary that they provided is while the dwindling rebellion starves, awaiting their chance to attack a First Order supply vessel, Rey is trying to keep busy repairing the lightsaber. As luck would have it, her force bonded rival, Kylo Ren, is knowledgeable on the subject and keen to help, but he is also very distracting. So that's the author summary. And I will, once we actually start talking spoilers here in a couple minutes, I'll give a more in depth summary of the story for anyone who kind of wants a little bit more info there. But I will say that the title of this, I was like, where is this story going? I was like, orange soup. What is that? There is actual soup in the story. So if you're
Yes.
wondering what that title's about, soup does make an appearance. So
Not just an appearance, it plays a key role in the entire story.
right. Yeah. But why would you recommend people read this fanfic?
Just for the funny, lighthearted moments, witty comments, and that like warm and fuzzy slow burn that just kind of makes you continue wanting to read.
Yeah, it definitely like keeps you interested because it keeps you in this sort of a will they won't they sort of asking the question, and you're like, are they gonna kiss or not? Like like when is this gonna happen? And that does pull you all the way through to the end of the fic. Yeah, I mean, I would say also for me, I liked it how what we see in this fic is the start of Rey actually trying to come to terms with who Kylo Ren is as a person. And this is something that I feel like I personally haven't read a ton of fanfics that get this like direct about it in terms of like Kylo Ren is a horrible person. He's done horrible things to Rey. He's done horrible things to other people, which Rey knows about. And it's like I feel like it's common for like a lot of times when we're reading a romance, We might not always have a lot of time to get super deep into that, or like maybe sometimes you're not in the mood to read like something that, I mean, that's a tall order. So I liked it how in this fic, it's being honest and direct about the fact that like Kylo Ren's a bad person. It does not sugarcoat that at all. And it's kind of like at some point, she's going to have to deal with this. She doesn't fully deal with it in this fic, but I do feel like we're starting to see the start of it, which I thought that was cool that that was included in here as explicitly as it was.
And the fact that the author could keep it still as lighthearted and fun as they were able to do, along with also being like, yeah, but he also murdered his dad.
Right. And then also still managed to tie it up into the start of a romance.
Yeah. The best kind of romance, I guess.
Yeah.
For
We're
paper
covering
only.
a lot of emotional ground in this fic.
Yes. That's some of my favorite parts about this. So let's move on to section 2, where we talk about spoilers. So here's your spoiler warning. Turn back now.
I will now give a more in-depth explanation about what this is about. So the way that this fic starts off is Rey is trying to figure out how to fix the lightsaber that her and Kylo Ren destroyed at the end of The Last Jedi. Anakin's lightsaber, of course. And she's not really making a ton of progress on it. And while she's doing this, he shows up through the Force bond, which kind of leads to them trying to figure out how the force bond works. And it's almost like they're doing like a little like science experiment of like, okay, you stand over there and like touch that thing, and then okay, like see if you can pick this up. Like they're just trying to figure out like what are the limitations of this thing and why are we connected in this way. So we see them kind of go back and forth with that for a while, and then they eventually get on the subject of the lightsaber itself. And Rey pretty much has to face that, like it or not, she needs his help with fixing the lightsaber. She doesn't know as much about lightsabers as he does. He has access to texts that explain how to do it. He's a stronger reader than she is because he's more educated, of course, and also he can read the language that they're written in. So she needs his help, and so she's kind of having to accept it even though she doesn't want to. And throughout this whole sort of conversation about how viable is this lightsaber, there's also like a lot of tension that the author is building up of like, are they going to kiss or not? Like, they're standing close to each other, they're kind of backing up, like, she's remarking to herself on how hot he is, all this stuff. And and a part of that tension, kind of what sort of breaks the ice, at least gets it started, is he has a bowl of soup. Rey is starving. The Resistance does not have a lot of supplies at this point, and he offers her the soup. And it's kind of like the first like act of kindness that really makes an impact on Rey, is that he saw that she was vulnerable. She's supposed to be his enemy, and he offered her food, which was a pretty simple gesture, but it spoke a lot to her. So, and then eventually they don't kiss, but they almost do, right? That was how
Yeah.
I interpreted it. Okay. There was a moment at the end where I was like, did they kiss? I'm not even sure. But okay, I was right. They didn't. And then Kylo Ren, because he cares for Rey and he feels guilty, eventually reveals some key intelligence that the First Order has about the Resistance. So he tells Rey that there's a trap being set up. Don't give into the trap. Basically, it has to do with like a fake supply run that's going to like lure them out. So he's like, don't fall for it. It's a trap. And Rey's like, okay, well, now I have this information. I have to figure out what to do with it. But he did reveal a pretty key strategic thing to her because he's starting to care for her.
Right. And also that not only did he say don't do the thing, he also gave her information about the Resistance can actually go to attack his ships. It's not just, hey, don't do that because you're going to get attacked. Here's some actual ships of mine that you can go attack and get supplies.
Good point. Yeah.
Which is big.
That's an even bigger deal than don't fall for the trap. That's like just handing over something to her.
And she makes a comment about how he's doing this act of kindness for her, but in the end is actually even helping the Resistance. And he's got to know that. And it's a big step. And she wonders about the goodness in him.
And that's pretty much the note that this fic ends on. It doesn't try to completely solve all of Kylo Ren's issues in this one fic. It's pretty much just like he made a step, a significant step, but it was only one step. And like they both still have a long way to go to see like if they could even move past this or not, or what their relationship is even going to be. But he did make a pretty important step in this story. So this story is also written in third person. And as we mentioned before, it's not really a long story. What did you think about the length of this? It really takes place with just like one scene.
It does. I thought it was kind of a perfect length. The author didn't rush through much of anything and didn't go too slow. It was a slow burn, but it was a slow burn in an actual what's happening, not the story just putzed along. I like the length, and I like also how it ended and how it ended so abruptly. It was perfect for that moment where, well, in the story, everything got cut off because somebody came in on his end. And so that was just the end. And that also is what happened with us. We're reading the story, and it was pretty much this is the end.
Yeah. And in this case, a lot of times I tend to be a little bit of a complainer about ambiguous endings, but in this case, I feel like it made sense. Like I just accepted the ambiguous ending in this case because it felt like this story was very deliberate in what it set out to do, and it didn't set out to like solve all of the problems. It showed us a little piece of progress being made. And then once that progress was made, then the story was told. And so whatever happens after that, I think is up for interpretation, and I'm okay with that.
And if the author ever wanted to go back, it's set up just enough where they could make another story.
Yeah, like they could do it if they wanted, but it doesn't feel like something's missing from it if they don't, which I mean that's a good balance to have. What did you feel like were the author's strengths in this story though?
I felt like the author did a very good job explaining all of the feelings that two people have when they first start to become attracted to each other. I don't know if you've ever had a crush on your, like, I don't know, in middle school, I had one where like we were enemies. We like picked on each other relentlessly. But when you first start to get the butterflies, the author did a great job explaining that back and forth you have in your mind. The author mentioned there was three feelings that Ray was dealing with the entire time. The feeling that they want to flee and run away, the feeling that they want to attack him, and the feeling that they want to wink, wink, nod, nod, attack him.
Yeah.
It was very realistic in that way, and that it's just a constant battle, and you have this pulling feeling in all different directions. And she did a great job explaining that and really making you feel it.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that too, like part of why that works so well, it kind of ties into what really stood out to me, which I've kind of already mentioned, but just the way that everything, like the full person of who Kylo Ren is at least acknowledged in this story. Like at one point in this story, there's like a whole list that Rey goes through in her mind of like all of the atrocities that he's committed that she knows of, which I'm sure there's more than just those. But she lists like pretty much everything that we see in the movies. Like he destroyed the planets, he killed his dad, he almost killed Finn, he tortured her. Like, I mean, everything that he does that I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to kind of skim over because it's like, oh, let's not think about that. This
Yeah,
story does mention all of them.
yes, yeah,
So,
multiple times. There's
yeah.
entire paragraphs dedicated to it, but like it's not jarring.
Yeah. But I definitely viewed it as a strength that the author didn't shy away from that. Like they deliberately included that as part of the story. So good on them for doing that. In addition to that, just the way that the tension was dragged out. I mean, dragged out deliberately. I don't mean dragged out in a bad way. I mean like I was on the edge of my seat. Like what are they going to do here? You know? So I mean to have you on the edge of your seat, I mean that takes skill, just all the emotions. Kind of like what you were saying already about just we've got the back and forth, good and bad, exciting and depressing. We've got it all in one story. And I feel like that whole range of emotions is described in a way that was convincing for me, at least.
Another thing I think the author did well with in the writing of this story is that they had the even though it was such a short story, they had those elements that you'd expect to see in a larger story, just on a smaller scale, where you have like the building of something and then everything crashes down and something's wrong and then it builds back up again. And in this case, it was that Ray had said something i- offhandedly, like about, oh, that's why you defected. It was about the soup.
Yeah.
Because the soup was so good on the in the first orders, that's why you defected. And then everything got silent, and she thought she'd really irritated him, and they had to work through that. And while it's such a short story, that working through only lasted a couple of paragraphs, but though it still has that element that you weren't expect. I wouldn't have expected to find in such a short story.
That's such a good point. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's so true that this story does hit a lot of those beats that you would expect in like a longer romance of like that back and forth and kind of like, you go a little forward and then you go a little back and then you go a little forward and you go a little back. And that's usually taking place over like a way longer period of time. But in this scene, we get it all in the span of like 30 minutes.
Yes, and in 1,500 words or 15,000 words, there was a lot going on,
Yeah.
but it didn't feel because the story was so short and they didn't try to shove in a long time span. It was really just a short, like a window into their life versus many things happening over time, which we've seen with other fan fiction they do a really good job with, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like we just got a little snippet. And I could see them being like, I mean, you could really write like an infinite amount of stories of moments like this where, there's an accidental confrontation that happens because of the force bond. Maybe they make progress, maybe they don't. And then where does that leave them at the end of that situation?
That would be kind of interesting to see a collection of all of the stories that people have of the little moments, because we only see a couple of them in canon stories. But what about all the other times that they accidentally popped in each other's lives?
Yeah, because I would think that it would have happened more than just twice. Because the way that they describe it in the films, to me, it always came across like it was an issue that had been going on. Should we talk about characters?
Yes. So we had only a couple characters in here. There was Ray and Kylo, and we get Finn at the very, very end. And we also I'm gonna toss in the soup as a character because it was a big deal.
The soup was a big deal. Yeah. I'm going to put some soup in my crock pot after that
Mm,
because it sounded good.
some
And I
neon
guess,
orange soup.
yeah. Well, and I guess Leia also is mentioned. We don't see her
Yeah.
on the page, but she's mentioned. So, did you feel like these characters, did they feel like canon characters to you, or did they feel like a different interpretation of those characters?
I definitely think they're a different interpretation. Ray, I think, was the closest to. I guess Leia was probably the closest to because she's just mentioned and kind of her character is mentioned and does a good job explaining in that little bit who she is. And Ray, we don't really have that much on anyway. Like just her personality type. Just we've talked about this many times. Where like Ray
Yeah.
just has this like meh personality, so she could
Yeah.
be anybody. But I think Kylo and Finn were both very different in this. Finn, for example, I don't think would have handled very well the whole the ending of this, where he came in and knew something and was just like, "Oh, everything's fine." No, I don't. I think he would have said something
He would have been like, Ray.
like, "What are you doing?" Like he would have said something. He would not have been okay with any of this.
Yeah,
You
he
saw how
wasn't.
quickly he like bounced as soon as anything went poorly in the movies.
Yeah, he's much more of a he's not passive at all in the movies. Like if he feels like something's wrong, he's not just going to be like, "Oh, okay," and then just leave it at that.
No.
Like he wants to get involved in a good way. Like I mean, I think that's why he's a great character.
But what about Kylo? What do you think of his character?
To me, okay. So yes, first of all, I do agree with you about Ray. Sometimes I don't know cuz I feel like I mean, I would like to get some more characterization of her in canon. So with fanfic, I'm much more willing to accept pretty much any interpretation of Rey, like whatever. I'm down with any of it. But with Kylo Ren, I kind of got a different feel from what you felt because the way that it's describing him like studying the lightsaber and how he's all like into it and like looking at the details and getting all analytical, to me, I was totally buying that. Like, I could see that as a canon interpretation of Kylo Ren because I feel like in the movies, I just kind of got that impression from him that he could just be very like into his like just the way that he does things. I don't know. For some reason, that was just working for me. I know that's mostly based on feeling and not really based on any concrete examples.
I do enjoy me a good sturdy academic, so
Yeah,
I
I
can.
could just, for me, that just made sense. But outside of that particular thing, it's hard for me to really say one way or the other because we only really have one scene to go on. So I'm kind of, I could see it in canon, and I could also see the view that it, like what you're saying, how he felt different to you. I could see that as well. So I'm not really
Yeah,
super firm one way or the other, I guess.
and none of it's bad. It's just interesting to read.
Yeah, I mean, I like seeing like how people have different interpretations of the characters because, we could all see the same canon thing and get a sort of different view and perspective on the character just based on our own personal life experiences and the way that we read stories and stuff like that. So, I always appreciate like even if someone's interpretation is different than mine, I always appreciate getting to see that other interpretation. I think that's what keeps fanfic interesting is everybody's got their own take on it. But okay, so as you were reading this, what were your did you have any like emotions, reactions, any gut punches that happened?
I wouldn't go with gut punches. Thank
When the
goodness.
soup was eaten, that was a gut punch. That was
Oh, it was very
crazy.
sad. Like I said before, I thought it was a really cute story, and that the characters weren't accurate to what I had in my head. I thought that the author did a great job building the characters and kind of showing. I don't know if it's growth, but you could just see the difference, their opinions and their feelings changing throughout it. Not so much Kylo, but the story really follows Rey and what Rey's experience of this is. And you do see that change from the beginning of, oh, I don't want anything to do with him, but also he's kind of cute to the kiss at the end. So that I do like watching that build. How about you?
Yeah, I would say my main reactions were just all based around this tension that the author was building where I was like, what is about to happen? But I do like the note that it ended on. So I guess that did kind of it surprised me in that way because usually I don't like ambiguous endings, but this author pulled it off. So I mean, kudos to them because they don't always work for me, but in this case it did.
So what was your favorite scene?
I think my favorite, well, I guess favorite line, because I guess this was just one scene, but my favorite moment was when he actually reveals that intelligence and tells her he just kind of like almost like snaps in a way and is like, okay, I admit it, like we know that this is fake, and then like what you were pointing out earlier, here's what you should actually do. That was like a big step in the right direction. So I would say that was probably my favorite part. But what about you?
I really enjoyed this one cute scene where because I think I enjoyed it so much because I've played this game before. It's like the keep away game where you're kind of flirting with somebody and they're trying to take something and you're trying to take something back from them. And it's over the spoon. Of all things,
Yeah.
they're fighting over the spoon. And because he wants her to eat it, but he's also still eating it. And that part's pretty cute in general. Is like she'd be eating and put the spoon down. He just like not even think about it, reach over and eat too. But my favorite part is when he's telling her that she should just pick up the lightsaber and let him see it because they figured out in the Force that they can see each other's the things that each other are interacting with. They can't see each other's surroundings, but they can see what each other is interacting with. So if she wants help with this lightsaber, she's gonna have to pick it up and show it to him. And she's like, "No way! Like you're gonna steal it back." And he's calling her suspicious. And then the spoon game's happening, and he reaches forward and snatches the spoon, and it's like telling her, "You shouldn't be so suspicious." And like accidentally knocks her backwards off of the whatever she's sitting on. He reaches out and catches her and pulls her to his chest, and there's all of the emotions and the feelings. And now you've taken my spoon, thief.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was so cute the way it came about and funny,
Also,
and I adored it.
I do have to admit that that is a very Ray sounding sort of quip. So,
Yeah. Yes. It was good. It was pretty perfect. Okay, so I have a question. Do you think that that way that they've explained how the force bond works and how they can pass things between them as long as each other is touching it, do you think that could be plausibly how they do it in canon?
I think so, actually. To me, it made a lot of sense because I'm remembering I'm really basing this off of one moment, which is in the Rise of Skywalker when he reaches out and like grabs that necklace because she's at that festival and they have those beaded necklaces and he reaches out and grabs it and it's like in his hand even after the vision's over. Like he somehow was able to transfer the necklace to himself and they like are able to find out what planet she's on because of the necklace. So based on that, I mean, to me it makes sense that if she's like holding the object or whatever it is, then he would be able to touch it or take it. So, yeah, I mean, I buy it.
When I kept my head going back to when Vader's helmet came through the bond and like that's what it was, right? It fell off the podium and rolled into the other person's side because then that's how he figured out she was on the ship.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so
Forgotten
there's
about the
2
necklace moment.
examples. Yeah.
Exactly. I
Okay.
felt this was a really good example, or at least an explanation of how the force bond worked. And I thought it was fun to watch them figure it out.
Yeah, because we do, by watching them figure it out, we kind of get a more in-depth explanation than the movie has time to give.
Yeah.
So it's nice to actually hear them sort of explain it to each other. Okay, so I will ask you a question now. So at the end of the story, when Rey is trying to figure out what to say to Leia to pass along the intel that she got from Kylo Ren, she says she's going to just claim that it was a Force vision. Do you think that Leia would have believed that?
Maybe not. Probably. Well, I don't know. But at the same time, I don't know if Leia will ask too many questions. She knows she's pretty good about secrets. Like if you're not telling me, you're not telling me for a reason. Probably. But I don't know if she'd believe her. What do you think?
I feel conflicted about this because I know, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty confident in my belief that Leia takes Force visions seriously. Like, I don't think she's going to doubt that Rey saw it in a vision, but I could see Leia being like, okay, is that what you really saw? Like, is what you saw, is that what you saw was actually saying? Because I feel like that's a
Oh,
lot of times
more
a
metaphorical
question.
than.
Yeah, like that's a lot of times a question that I feel like comes up in canon is like how literally should force visions be taken? And so I could see Leia being like, "Okay, thank you for telling me about the vision, but I might handle it differently than the way that you want me to handle it."
Yeah, I could see that. I hadn't considered it from that angle. But yes, because you're right, force visions tend to be like a riddle more than actually showing you something.
Yeah, it's like you've got to interpret it, and if you interpret it wrong, then that could lead to consequences.
And what if it's the dark side giving you bad visions?
Yeah, you just never know.
Next question I have for you. Why, when Finn so clearly knew something was up, why didn't why didn't he say anything? Do you think he actually knew it was Kylo? Or did he, because the story made it seem like he knew something was up and that he'll support her vision she had and like hands her the glove because the glove had fallen
Oh, dude,
through.
I forgot about the glove. That is so
Yes.
obvious. He knew it was Kylo Ren, but who else's glove would that be?
Could
Who
be any
else's
dude's glove, I
would-
guess.
Who else wears black gloves?
I don't know. They're just black gloves. I don't.
Black leather gloves. I mean, his outfit is pretty like. I mean, you know whose outfit that is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, okay, because yeah, this is. I get what you're saying earlier about how you felt like this Finn was very different than canon Finn because okay, at first I was like, "Oh, there's no way that he could have guessed it was Kylo Ren." So, like, he probably just thought that maybe she wanted to keep something private and he was just letting her do that. But now that you brought up the black glove, which I had totally forgotten about until just now I'm kind of like, what? I mean, I don't know what I would think if I was in that position. Like, how would you, like, whose glove is this? This room.
Right. And the author made it very clear that he knew something was up, and that vision, he'll believe the vision. Because the next sentence was something along the lines of, uh, I don't remember what it said, but it said something about how, like, he didn't mean that. He
Yeah.
knew it was happening.
Be like,
But
okay.
what did he think? Because if it was canon, Finn, and he knew that Kylo was in that room, he would have been having a conniption. Like, that is a
Right.
bad idea.
Right. And also just like being concerned about your friend in terms of like, okay, you're acting weird. You're saying that there was a force vision, but there was obviously just a man in here. Like, like, why are you lying about that when it's very
Right.
clear? Yeah, I don't know. That one's kind of stumped me because maybe the reason you know what? Okay, here's what I think based on this interpretation of Finn. I almost wonder if he was just kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to open that can of worms. If she doesn't want to tell me, fine. I can't even begin to deal with that.
Maybe he's got a secret affair with Poe in this universe, and he doesn't want her to say anything to anybody else. And so,
Yeah. He's like,
you
I
know what?
don't ask you. You don't ask me. Let's just keep this all on the down low because we don't need to start that. Maybe. My last question for you. So I'm going to read this quote and tell me if you feel like, in your own opinion, you're with this quote or you're not. As good and beautiful as she wanted him to be, and as brutal and terrible as he wanted himself to be, he was never going to be either, not completely. Do you feel like, true or false in terms of, do you think that it's true that he would never actually go fully one way or the other? Or like, is there no hope for him? Or do you think it's possible that he could have actually gone all the way one way or the other in this story?
Oh, in this story, I think he could have gone full light side, because in this story he did make such a switch. It wasn't, you didn't have as much angst and brooding and I'm such a terrible person, where there was that there. He also just so willingly and easily was kind and did things without thought that anyone who was truly that dark wouldn't have done.
That's a good point. Yeah, because it's like he doesn't really seem to be having any sort of conflict. Like once he tells her, like once he actually gets over that initial like and like tells her the information, he doesn't seem to be regretting it or anything like that. Like once he actually gets it out, then it's out there and he seems to be okay with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that is a sign that like, over time there would be a little bit more getting closer and closer to the light and then maybe ultimately going all the way over. I think there's always, in pretty much every fanfic that I've read, I think I've always felt like that Kylo Ren could go back to the light. Like there's always been that opportunity there. But I did like it how in this line, I thought it was cool just the way that this author illustrates how he's more complex than just light or dark. And I just felt like the way that it was worded, the words just kind of made a lot of sense to me in terms of he's not really one extreme or the other. Well, he is an extreme. No, you know what it is? He's both extremes in one person. And that's I
Yeah, I
think
like that.
why yeah, that's why it's never really black and white with him is because he's got all the extremes wrapped up.
Actually, really well written line. I like it. Okay, so next month I picked our story. I went searching for a Qui-Gon fanfic.
Yes.
I found a couple Qui-Gon Force Ghost fanfics, but they
Oh
were
my god.
very poorly written.
Oh
so,
no.
so I wasn't
Uh
going to subject us and our
I'm
listeners to
impressed
that.
that you tried. I'm really impressed that you tried.
Okay, so this next one we're reading is Hollow by JennMel, and we'll provide the link to that in our show description. Right now, I don't know how long it's going to last. Apparently, AO3 is having issues. They've been having issues for the last couple of months, but as of right now, they're down. I could open up the description page of a fanfic, but everything else just wasn't working.
Oh, that
Um,
sucks. Hopefully that gets addressed soon.
I hope so. Now, so I pulled this one's off of fanfic.net, but most of them are in both. So the link I have is to fanfic, but it's really the same thing. It's just a website with fanfiction. So you'll be able to read it. Fanfiction happens during the Phantom Menace, and it's a short story where it's like 5,500 words, where the author was just like, why did this one thing happen? So they wrote this little tiny fanfiction about why this thing that's happening during the Phantom Menace is happening. And it just stays canon compliant. From what I understand, it stays canon compliant throughout it and just kind of inserts a little extra scene into the movie. I did write down the description. Yeah.
Mysterious.
Now, the description doesn't really help that much. It says, Obi-Wan has always had a secret, and Qui-Gon must not, ever know. And if he did, then there would never, ever make it to Tatooine, let alone deal with the rest to come. One perfect possible future, and that's all Obi-Wan needed to achieve. That's all.
Well, that sounds like Obi-Wan.
Right?
Oh my god.
So
okay.
we haven't really read much canon compliant, like truly canon compliant things. So especially one that happens in the middle of a movie. So I'm looking forward to seeing this author's interpretation and explanation of whatever he's talking about.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's a lot to keep straight to make it truly canon compliant. So that sounds very interesting. I'm intrigued about this secret. So I'm excited to read it. That sounds like a good choice.
All right. So where can you find us?
You can find us on Instagram. Our Instagram is one hell of a fanfic with a period in between every word. And that's where we post what we're going to be reading, what we're currently reading, what we're reading next month, all that good stuff. And we are also on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is just called One Hell of a Fanfic. And that's where we post our videos of our recordings if you like to watch while you listen.
And also I said it last month and I totally failed to follow through, but hopefully this month, I opened up a Telegram chat. If you'd like to come out and talk to us, I am going to make it a full-blown effort to put that out on Instagram.
It's a process.
It is.
Cool. Well, that sounds good. And we will see y'all next month for our next fanfic. And I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day, week, month, summer, all that good stuff.
Okay.
Good rest of your life. Bye, y'all. Thanks so much for joining us at One Hell of a Fanfic. On this podcast, we discuss Star Wars fan fiction, but we do not own the rights to Star Wars or any of the written works we cover. We have no affiliation with Lucasfilm or the fanfic authors we credit for their work. For questions, please email us at onehellofafanfic@gmail.com.